Kansas, 2006. A quiet rural town held a secret that had haunted it for more than a decade. The sun was just beginning to rise over the fields of Chase County, casting long shadows across the farmhouses and barns. Most residents went about their mornings unaware of the darkness that had once swept through their community. A darkness that had stolen 2 young lives and left questions lingering for years. On a crisp October morning, the Thompson family's story resurfaced in the minds of those who had lived through the unthinkable. It was the morning when 14-year-old Emily Thompson and her 12-year-old brother, Jacob, had vanished on their way home from school, their bicycles abandoned near the edge of a wooded area. The initial search had been frantic and exhaustive. Neighbors, local police, and volunteers combed the surrounding fields, creeks, and abandoned farm structures. But after weeks of searching, the trail had gone cold, leaving a community gripped by fear and uncertainty. Emily was known for her infectious laughter and love for drawing. She would spend hours sketching scenes from around the farm, capturing the world with a maturity beyond her years. Jacob, energetic and curious, loved baseball and had dreams of playing in the minor leagues one day. Their parents, Sarah and Daniel Thompson, had watched them grow up with pride and joy, never imagining that one day the world would take them away so abruptly. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. The local authorities did what they could with limited resources, but the case became one of those unresolved tragedies that townsfolk whispered about, unsure whether to hope or grieve. Yet for Sarah and Daniel, hope never faded. Each evening, Sarah would set the family dinner as if Emily and Jacob would return. Plates sat untouched, but they symbolized the family's refusal to give up. Daniel spent hours poring over maps, timelines, and witness statements, teaching himself investigative techniques because he believed the system had failed. Community members who had once been supportive gradually withdrew, unsure how to console parents trapped between hope and despair. The Thompsons became a fixture of resilience in the town, their quiet determination inspiring some, but alienating others who felt helpless in the face of an unsolvable mystery. Over the years, the children's bedrooms remained untouched, their belongings preserved as memorials of life interrupted. The investigation never fully stopped. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation kept the case file active, periodically reviewing evidence and interviewing new witnesses. In 2010, advances in DNA technology sparked renewed hope. Small samples collected at the scene years earlier, once deemed unusable, were sent to labs capable of analyzing degraded evidence. Unfortunately, nothing conclusive emerged, and the family continued to live in the shadow of uncertainty. By 2015, Emily and Jacob's case had taken on an almost mythic status in Chase County. New residents would hear the story from older neighbors, embellishments and rumors mingling with fact. There were whispered sightings of 2 children on rural trails, stories that faded when anyone tried to investigate. Yet for the Thompsons, the story was painfully real, a void that nothing could fill. Then, in late 2019, a breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source. Investigators had begun applying genealogy databases to unsolved crimes, a technique that had solved numerous cold cases across the country. By cross-referencing DNA evidence preserved from the original investigation with these databases, they identified a possible relative of the unknown suspect. The discovery set in motion a chain of events that would finally pierce the decades of silence surrounding Emily and Jacob's disappearance. The suspect, Robert Harlan, had long blended into the small-town fabric. To neighbors, he was unremarkable, a quiet man who maintained his property diligently, kept to himself and occasionally helped local farmers with equipment repairs. He had never attracted serious suspicion, though investigators discovered he had been questioned briefly in 2006 due to proximity to the area where the children were last seen. At the time, his answers seemed plausible, and nothing tied him conclusively to the crime. In January 2020, Harlan was brought in for questioning. Investigators presented the new evidence, confronting him with the genetic links that connected him to the crime scene. At first he denied involvement, maintaining a calm exterior that concealed the weight of decades-old misdeeds. But as the questioning continued and forensic results were revealed, cracks in his story appeared. Eventually, after hours of interrogation, Harlan confessed, providing chilling details of what had happened on that autumn day in 2006. The confession shocked the community to its core. Families who had grown accustomed to the unresolved fear now faced the reality that the children had been taken by someone who had lived among them for years, someone whose ordinary appearance had masked extraordinary danger. The discovery brought both relief and renewed sorrow. Emily and Jacob's bodies had been hidden in an abandoned grain silo on the outskirts of Chase County. Preserved in a manner that spoke to premeditation and concealment, the Thompson family was notified immediately. Daniel Thompson, who had spent nearly 14 years searching tirelessly, sat in stunned silence, the weight of truth mingling with grief he had carried for over a decade. Sarah Thompson, unable to attend the site for fear of breaking down, clung to the support of friends and family, finally able to acknowledge the reality she had avoided for so long. The arrest of Robert Harlan forced Chase County to confront uncomfortable truths about community awareness, investigative limitations, and the quiet dangers that can hide in plain sight. The local police department, previously criticized for the slow progress in the case, worked closely with state authorities to ensure that all evidence was thoroughly documented, the confession corroborated, and the case prepared for trial. Forensics played a critical role in confirming Harlan's guilt. DNA analysis, combined with soil samples, fiber evidence, and testimonial corroboration, built an irrefutable case. Investigators painstakingly reconstructed the events of that fateful day, from the children's departure from school to their final moments, demonstrating the meticulous planning involved. Harlan's knowledge of local terrain, his access to secluded areas, and his ability to manipulate the scene had allowed him to evade justice for years. As news of the arrest spread, residents of Chase County experienced a wave of mixed emotions. Relief mingled with disbelief. People struggled to reconcile the image of a seemingly normal neighbor with the horrors he had committed. The case reignited conversations about vigilance, community responsibility, and the ways ordinary people can conceal extraordinary evil. For the Thompson family, the arrest marked a turning point. While nothing could bring Emily and Jacob back, the acknowledgement of the truth, the public recognition of Harlan's guilt, and the imminent trial provided a sense of justice long denied. They became active advocates for missing children's cases, participating in awareness campaigns, supporting legislation to improve evidence preservation, and helping other families navigate the emotional challenges of long-term uncertainty. This breakthrough, nearly 14 years after the children's disappearance, reinforced the power of persistence, modern technology, and community vigilance. It was a reminder that no case is ever truly closed if evidence remains, memories endure, and investigators refuse to give up. The story of Emily and Jacob Thompson would now serve as a cautionary tale, a call to action, and a source of inspiration for families, law enforcement, and communities across the nation. The discovery of Robert Harlan's confession sent ripples through Chase County that would be felt for months. Local authorities immediately began coordinating with federal experts, ensuring that the investigation remained airtight. Every detail Harlan provided was scrutinized, compared with historical evidence, and cross-checked with eyewitness accounts from 2006. Investigators wanted to be certain there were no discrepancies before proceeding to court. Sarah and Daniel Thompson, now in their early 50s, had spent years imagining the worst while clinging to a fragile hope that their children might still be alive. Each year that passed without answers had carved a deeper void in their lives, a pain that became almost routine, a constant companion. Yet now, with Harlan's confession, that void transformed into a different kind of ache, the confirmation of death, the cruel realization of what had been endured by Emily and Jacob in their final moments. Despite the heartbreak, the family was resolute. Daniel, who had spent countless nights mapping the area where the children disappeared, now walked the same fields with a sense of grim purpose. He meticulously retraced routes, revisited witness statements, and noted landmarks mentioned in Harlan's confession. Sarah, meanwhile, focused on the emotional side of the ordeal. She attended therapy sessions for trauma survivors and worked with support groups for families of missing children. Each conversation, each shared story, helped her process decades of fear, uncertainty, and loss. In the community, people struggled to reconcile their memories of Harlan with the man now revealed as a predator. Neighbors recalled his quiet demeanor, his willingness to help with farm repairs, and the polite greetings he had offered over the years. No one could comprehend how someone so ordinary could commit acts so heinous and evade detection for over a decade. The dissonance between perception and reality became a topic of intense discussion in local schools, churches, and town meetings. Law enforcement officers reflected on their own experiences, acknowledging mistakes and gaps in the original investigation. Detectives who had worked on the 2006 case admitted that limited resources, combined with Harlan's careful planning, had allowed him to slip through the cracks. The review prompted a county-wide initiative to improve cold case management, with new protocols for preserving evidence, maintaining detailed logs, and ensuring periodic case reviews even when no immediate leads emerged. Harlan's confession also included chilling details that revealed the calculated nature of his actions. He described how he had observed the children for days, noting their routines, the times they left school, and the paths they favored. He admitted to using his knowledge of secluded areas around Chase County to select a location where he could conceal them, confident that it would remain undiscovered. His ability to exploit the landscape, combined with a patient and manipulative demeanor, had allowed him to evade suspicion. For forensic teams, the case became a masterclass in applying modern technology to historical evidence. Soil samples collected near the grain silo where Emily and Jacob were found revealed microtraces of fibers that matched clothing recovered from the original investigation. Advanced DNA profiling confirmed the identities of the children, eliminating any lingering doubt. Blood spatter analysis, combined with reconstruction techniques, allowed investigators to determine the sequence of events, the method of confinement, and the likely timeline of their final hours. The Thompson family remained at the center of the unfolding investigation. Friends and extended relatives provided emotional support, ensuring that Sarah and Daniel were not overwhelmed by the sudden influx of media attention. Local journalists, long familiar with the story, returned with renewed interest, documenting each development with sensitivity and care. The balance between public scrutiny and private grief was delicate, and the family navigated it with quiet dignity. Meanwhile, the legal team preparing for Harlan's trial faced unique challenges. Prosecutors had to establish a case that would withstand scrutiny despite the passage of time, relying heavily on historical records, corroborated confession details, and forensic evidence. They built a narrative that emphasized Harlan's premeditation, exploitation of trust, and the deliberate concealment of the children's bodies. Defense attorneys, while attempting to highlight Harlan's age and perceived frailty, struggled against the overwhelming weight of evidence and the compelling confession. Community reaction continued to evolve as more details emerged. Candlelight vigils were organized once again, this time not only to honor the memory of Emily and Jacob, but also to support the family through the renewed media attention. Residents shared stories of the children, recalling moments of kindness, laughter, and curiosity. The vigils became both a form of collective mourning and a celebration of the lives that had been tragically cut short. The psychological impact of the confession was profound. For Sarah and Daniel, the knowledge of what had happened provided clarity, but also intensified the grief that had been deferred for over a decade. Therapy sessions revealed layers of trauma, including survivor guilt, persistent anxiety, and the lingering fear that something similar could happen to other families. The couple became advocates for mental health resources, sharing their experiences to help others navigate the aftermath of unresolved crime. Investigators also focused on understanding Harlan's history beyond Chase County. They discovered prior incidents in neighboring counties where similar patterns had emerged. A fascination with children, proximity to vulnerable targets, and unexplained absences that coincided with unsolved cases. While these incidents had not resulted in charges at the time, they provided a broader context for understanding the behavior that had culminated in the abduction of Emily and Jacob. As winter approached, the community of Chase County began to grapple with a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that the perpetrator had finally been identified, sorrow for the lives lost and the years stolen from the Thompson family. Schools incorporated discussions on community safety and awareness, while law enforcement held training sessions on cold case methodologies. The case became a turning point for local practices, inspiring efforts to prevent similar tragedies in the future. For the Thompson family, the months leading up to the trial were a delicate balance of preparation and reflection. They met with prosecutors, provided input on victim impact statements, and revisited the memories of their children. Each step required confronting the pain that had been carefully compartmentalized for years, a task made both necessary and agonizing by Harlan's confession. When the trial date was finally set, the town of Chase County braced for an emotional reckoning. Courtrooms were arranged to accommodate the press, family members and law enforcement personnel, with security measures in place to ensure proceedings were orderly and safe. Sarah and Daniel Thompson attended every session, their presence a testament to years of perseverance and the unwavering belief that justice, no matter how delayed, was worth pursuing. The courtroom was tense the day the trial began. Families, friends, and residents of Chase County filled the seats, a mixture of sorrow, anger, and anticipation reflected in their faces. Sarah and Daniel Thompson sat side by side, hands clasped tightly, bracing themselves for the confrontation with the man who had taken their children. The courtroom cameras captured every detail, though the family had requested minimal media intrusion to preserve some privacy. The prosecution opened with a clear, methodical narrative, tracing Harlan's actions from the days before Emily and Jacob vanished through the confession and culminating in the chilling details of the crime scene. Photographs of the area where the children were found were presented, each image meticulously labeled and referenced. The forensic evidence, once considered outdated or irrelevant, was now at the center of the case. DNA analysis showed irrefutable matches, fiber traces corroborated Harlan's own statements, and the reconstructed timeline illustrated his premeditated movements with exacting precision. Witnesses who had known Harlan decades earlier took the stand. Former neighbors described him as polite, but unusually private, often avoiding deep conversations or community events. Some admitted that in hindsight, there were small peculiar behaviors, odd comments about children, unexplained absences, or excessive attention to local routines, that now seemed frighteningly significant. Each testimony painted a picture of a man who had hidden in plain sight, blending seamlessly into everyday life, while concealing a terrible secret. Emily and Jacob's teachers from 2006 were also called to testify. Their recollections were vivid. Two bright, curious children who had made friends easily, displayed kindness to classmates, and had daily routines that were predictable yet innocent. The teachers spoke of the abrupt disappearance, the shock that rippled through the school, and the lingering impact on students and staff. Their testimony underscored the tragedy's profound effect not only on the family, but on the wider community. The defense attempted to shift focus, emphasizing Harlan's age, his declining health, and the decades that had passed since the crime. They argued that incarceration would be unduly harsh for a man now in his late 60s. They also highlighted gaps in historical investigative techniques, suggesting that the delays and oversights were collective failures, not solely Harlan's doing. Yet the jury appeared unmoved. The evidence was direct, corroborated, and devastatingly precise. Harlan's own words, paired with forensic science, left little room for doubt. Throughout the trial, Sarah and Daniel maintained a stoic presence. Each day was emotionally exhausting, a relentless immersion into grief and memory, yet their resolve never faltered. They had waited over a decade for this moment, and they were determined to see it through. Their commitment inspired many in the courtroom, and even the jury seemed to sense the weight of their decades-long struggle. Expert witnesses presented complex forensic evidence in ways that were clear and accessible. DNA technicians explained the extraction and comparison process, showing how even decades-old samples could provide accurate matches using modern technology. Crime scene analysts reconstructed the timeline, illustrating how Harlan had manipulated the terrain to hide the children and avoid detection. Specialists in behavioral psychology testified on Harlan's patterns, describing the premeditation, fixation, and manipulative tendencies that made him both dangerous and difficult to identify in 2006. The prosecution also introduced digital evidence that had never existed during the original investigation. Security camera footage from nearby establishments, though grainy, helped establish Harlan's movements on the day of the disappearance. Cell phone tower data, collected retrospectively, corroborated witness statements about his location. Even small, seemingly insignificant details, a purchase receipt, a maintenance log, a note found in Harlan's personal files, combined to create a meticulous and damning mosaic of his actions. Community members were permitted to speak during victim impact sessions. Parents, neighbors, and friends described the lingering trauma, the ways the disappearance had shaped their own lives, and the collective sense of vulnerability that had endured. Their words painted a vivid picture of a town suspended in grief for over a decade, a community forever altered by the actions of one man who had seemed ordinary. As the trial progressed, emotional moments punctuated the proceedings. Sarah's voice broke when reading a letter she had written to Emily and Jacob, expressing love, sorrow, and the hope that justice would finally arrive. Daniel's testimony, recounting the meticulous searches he conducted and the years of sleepless nights, drew audible empathy from those in the courtroom. Each personal account reminded everyone present that this was not just a case of cold forensic data. It was a story of human lives irrevocably changed, of childhood stolen, and of parents who had endured unimaginable anguish. Harlan remained impassive throughout. He rarely looked toward the family, maintained a neutral expression, and declined to testify. His stoicism contrasted sharply with the intensity of the evidence presented against him, emphasizing the chilling disconnection between his outward appearance and his inner culpability. Prosecutors noted this in closing arguments, highlighting how his calm demeanor had helped him evade suspicion and live undetected for so long. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Outside the courthouse, the community held its collective breath. Friends of the Thompson family organized vigils, while local media provided careful coverage, balancing public interest with sensitivity. The suspense was palpable. For many, this trial was more than a legal proceeding. It was a long-awaited reckoning for the grief that had permeated Chase County for over a decade. When the verdict was finally read, the courtroom was silent. The jury returned unanimous guilty verdicts on all counts, affirming first-degree murder charges. Sarah and Daniel embraced briefly, tears mingling with relief. Justice, though delayed, had been served. Judge Patricia Reynolds imposed consecutive life sentences. emphasizing the deliberate nature of Harlan's crimes, the devastation caused to the family, and the need for society to recognize the severity of premeditated acts against children. The aftermath of the verdict brought both closure and lingering pain. The Thompson family, while grateful for justice, had to confront a new reality, living with the knowledge of the crimes rather than the uncertainty of their outcome. Therapy continued. Support groups became a central part of their routine, and the family began long-term plans for memorials and community outreach programs. The case also sparked broader discussions across Kansas about cold case investigations. Law enforcement agencies reviewed their archival processes, improved evidence preservation, and initiated public awareness campaigns. Local schools introduced educational programs on community vigilance, the importance of reporting suspicious behavior, and the impact of long-term trauma on families. The trial had not only brought justice for Emily and Jacob, but it also reshaped collective understanding of crime, investigation, and prevention in the region. Forensic teams reflected on the case as a milestone in cold case resolution. The combination of historical evidence, advanced DNA technology, digital data, and a detailed confession demonstrated the power of modern investigative techniques. Lessons from the Thompson case became a model for other jurisdictions facing long unsolved disappearances, highlighting the necessity of revisiting evidence with new methods. Even decades after a crime, community healing was gradual. Vigils, memorials, and public events served both as remembrance and as mechanisms for collective catharsis. Residents shared stories, photographs, and memories of the children, allowing their legacy to persist beyond the crime itself. For many, the trial was a reminder of the fragility of life, the dangers of assuming familiarity equates to safety, and the enduring resilience of families who refuse to surrender hope. Sarah and Daniel Thompson began working on a foundation in Emily and Jacob's names, dedicated to supporting cold case investigations and providing resources for families of missing children. Their mission was clear: to prevent other families from enduring the prolonged agony they had lived through, and to ensure that modern technology was used to bring closure wherever possible. In the months following the trial, Harlan remained incarcerated, isolated from the community he had once deceived. His lack of remorse, refusal to explain his motives, and persistent silence only underscored the horror of his actions. Yet for the Thompson family, the conviction represented the culmination of years of perseverance, advocacy, and unwavering love. Justice, though delayed, had finally arrived, and with it a measure of peace that had been denied for over a decade. The sentencing day arrived on a crisp October morning. The Thompson family, now surrounded by decades of friends, advocates, and law enforcement supporters, entered the courthouse with quiet determination. Sarah and Daniel clung to each other's hands, while extended family members offered support. The weight of 13 years, countless sleepless nights, and endless what-ifs seemed to hang in the air. Heavy and unyielding, Judge Patricia Reynolds began the proceedings with solemnity, acknowledging the gravity of the crime and the long journey the family had endured. She spoke directly to Harlan, emphasizing the magnitude of his actions and the enduring trauma inflicted upon Emily, Jacob, and the entire community. "This court recognizes the extraordinary pain your actions have caused," she said. "No passage of time diminishes the horror of your crime, nor the lives lost. The impact is felt not only by the victim's family, but by every resident